his. I say to him, how can you give me this pot of oil or this flagon of wine when all your oil and wine is mine? Which belief of mine this gift seems to deny. In other words, if everything you have is mine and everything I have is yours because we are close friends, then technically you can't give me anything that I don't already own. It's a fascinating idea, right? We think, for example, maybe in its most compelling way, of that classic O. Henry story, The Gift of the Magi, where the beautiful woman with the long hair cuts her hair because she knows her guy wants to have a chain for his pocket watch that he loves. And the man loves the woman so much that he goes out and he sells his prized pocket watch to buy her a comb for her hair. And of course, upon the exchange of gifts, both of them have to laugh about the fact that she has no need now for a comb because her hair's all cut off. And he, of course, has no need, right, for a chain for a pocket watch because he sold his pocket watch. The gift of the Magi is, of course, an allusion to the story of the three Magi who exchanged gifts to the baby, the infant Jesus. Hence, he says, the fitness of beautiful, not useful things for gifts, right? In other words, the back and forth of giving something beautiful versus something useful. And this has always been the question in gift giving, right? Do you just give something that's kind of nice, or do you give something that's useful, right? Hence, the fitness of beautiful, not useful things for gifts. This giving is flat usurpation, and therefore, when the beneficiary is ungrateful, as all beneficiaries hate all Timons, of course, Timon's the Timon of Athens, that classic story, who would just kind of like to give to people who love to flatter him until he ran out of money. We think of the prodigal son, don't we, in that story? And then he ends up having to work in a field, and once in the field he discovers a pot of gold. There's different versions of the story. And then when all of a sudden all those friends, fake friends of him, now they're ready to be friends of his again, and he's like, no, I'll bag you. In the end, Timon almost comes to represent a person who is going to abandon society. He doesn't like the whole idea of living in society, a misanthrope. Hate all Timons, not at all considering the value of the gift, but looking back to the greater store it was taken from. I rather sympathize with the beneficiary than with the anger of my Lord Timon. For the expectation of gratitude is mean, and is continually punished by the total insensibility of the obliged person. Now this is an interesting idea, and it will remind us of the Bhagavad Gita's passage too. You have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of your labor. Desire for the fruits must never be your motive in working. Emerson would say the same thing about gift giving. If you give a gift, you mustn't assume that there will be gratitude associated with the gift giving. In other words, I'm going to give you this and you better show me that you really appreciate it. Emerson says there's something fundamentally wrong in that attitude. If you give a gift, you should be able to give the gift and be totally happy whether the individual shows his or her recognition of the gift or not. It's a great happiness to get off without injury and heart burning from one who has had the ill luck to be served by you. It's a very onerous position of business, he says, this of being served, and the debtor naturally wishes to give you a slap. In other words, he says, anytime you give a gift, you always run the risk that the individual will say, ooh, now that you've given me a gift, I got to give you a gift back, and that kind of thing, right? A golden text for these gentlemen is that which I so admire in the Buddhists, who never thanks, and who says, quote, do not flatter your benefactors, end quote. Let's just pause for a moment and point out how brilliant it is that Emerson is always using references and allusions to other great religious and wisdom traditions. In the lecture Prior in Manners, he talks about the great Islamic king. Here he quotes a Buddhist text. If you give me something, don't expect for me to tell you and flatter you with how amazing it is, right? I mean, it's a classic example. Back to the example of my daughter giving me the recitation of a set of lines. She knew in the moment she gave me that set of lines, which of course was very important in our exchanges and in my educating her as a young child. She knew that when she recited that poem to me that I would have to be blown away by this gift. And she didn't need for me to go off and talk at length about how amazed I was. She didn't need any of that. She knew what that gift meant to me, and this is the point Emerson's making here. Paragraph number 5. The reason of these discords I conceive to be that there is no commensurability between a man and any gift. You cannot give anything to a magnanimous person. Now, magnanimous here means amazing, loving, kind, generous person. I remember a student once saying, I never know what to give my mom. She's the most amazing woman on this planet. I have incredible respect for her. But I never know what to give her. It's like, she's such an amazing person. I'm like, what does she need? She doesn't need anything. She's one of the kind of people that doesn't need anything anyway. I never know. It's like terrible. I come around gift giving season. I don't know what to give to her because it's like she doesn't need anything and she doesn't want anything that I would buy or whatever. And he says it as much. After you've served him, he at once puts you in debt by his magnanimity. The service of a man renders his friend as trivial and selfish compared with the service he knows his friend stood in readiness to yield him, alike before he had begun to serve his friend and now also. Compared with that goodwill I bear my friend, the benefit it is in my power to render him seems small. In other words, the greatest gift is the gift of friendship. Everything else pales in comparison. It's fun sometimes to be able to say this to somebody you truly care about. The most important gift you can give to me is the gift of your friendship. I don't need anything else. I don't want anything else from you. Besides, he says, our action on each other, good as well as evil, is so incidental and at random that we can seldom hear the acknowledgement of any person who would thank us for a benefit without some shame and humiliation. In other words, it's almost better, he says, if I just give a gift to my friend and the friend doesn't say anything back, because there's a sense of kind of almost like humiliation in the fact that, oh, they feel obligated to say thank you for this gift and all of that. It's better, he says, to just give the gift and not worry about whether the person or the individual likes the gift or not, right? We can rarely strike a direct stroke, but must be content with an oblique one. We seldom have the satisfaction of yielding a direct benefit which is directly received. But rectitude, morally correct behavior, scatters favors on every side without knowing it, and receives with wonder the thanks of all people. In a classic reference, Gibran, in a famous poem by Gibran on friendship, he makes this observation that, I mean, think about a tree, like, a fruit tree. I mean, Ruthie's tree is out there, so we use it as the example. The fruit tree will grow the fruit. An apple tree will grow the apples. Anybody can come up and pluck the apple. And it's not like the tree says, hey, before you take that, I need to make sure that you're going to appreciate it. No. The fruit tree will give its fruit without any kind of desire for some kind of thank you or some kind of follow-up observation. Why can't we be like trees, Emerson will say? Why can't we just give gifts and receive gifts without a lot of hoopla about it? It's an interesting essay, right? Here we go, last paragraph. I fear to breathe any treason against the majesty of love, which is the genius and God of gifts, to whom we must not affect to prescribe. In other words, any time that a gift is given in love, or love itself is the penultimate gift, he says, I'm not going to speak against that. That, he says, is a whole nother ballgame entirely. Let him give kingdoms or flower leaves indifferently. There are persons from whom we always expect fairy tokens. We think of children. And in some ways, we'll point out here in a moment, this is maybe the distinction between being an adult and being a child. Children expect gifts. They want gifts. They're upset if they don't get gifts when grandma or grandpa or whoever shows up. What did you get me? Adults are less inclined to feel this way. This is an interesting Emersonian idea, right? Let us not cease to expect them. This is prerogative and not to be limited by our municipal rules. For the rest, I like to see that we cannot be bought and sold. The best of hospitality and of generosity is also not in the will, but in fate, the exchange of friends. I mean, one of the greatest gifts often that we can give is to give someone out of our generosity. Have them over for a meal. I mean, I've often said this to my students in regards to our study in Tintern Abbey. Those little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. It's often a great thing. Mom, tonight, let me make the meal. You don't have to do anything. I'll make it. I'll clean it up, everything. Well, why do you got to? Because I want to. Because I want to say thank you. It's my gift to you. It's all I want to do, right? Your mom will remember that gift way more than a $500 necklace that you might buy for her, because it's given out of a place of love, is Emerson's point here. I find then I am not much to you. You do not need me. You do not feel me. Then am I thrust out of doors, though you proffer me house and lands. Some students have pointed out, a student once said, this was my old man. He left us and ran off with somebody else, but he felt like he could somehow buy our love by giving us stuff, lots of money, lots of gifts. He would buy these amazing vacations for me, but it was always hard for me because really what I wanted was I wanted him to be honest and true, and I wanted the exchange to be honest and true. I wanted it to be an exchange of love, and it was almost like I felt like he was kind of buying my affection. No services are of any value, but only likeness. In other words, gifts have to be given and received on equal plane. When I have attempted to join myself to other by services, it proved an intellectual trick, no more. Students, for example, who want to somehow have more friends, so they will buy them things or give them gifts. And Emerson says, this is kind of tragic. The only legitimate gifts are the ones that are given between likes, similars, friends. They eat your service like apples and leave you out. But love them, and they feel you and delight in you all the time. What a wonderful last line of this essay. Love them, and they feel you and delight in you all the time. Well, this is, of course, wonderful stuff. Let's pause now and just finish it to messages, themes. Think of it this way. Emerson will argue that quality in gift giving is always better than quantity, right? And if an individual can't understand that, then that individual is probably not an individual with whom you can have a really close relationship. I've often said that this is a great test for lovers. If the individual with whom you are in love is unable to appreciate a gift that's given out of the simplicity of the heart, out of love, it might very well be the case that this is an individual with whom you may not be able to share a long-term relationship with, because there will always be this need for I want. Of course, again, the damages and the dangers of receiving a gift, right? Is it the case that you then owe someone something? Or can you receive a gift and not feel that you owe them in some way because it's an exchange between equals, if you will? Often, another major message here, Emerson will say, often gifts are kind of a waste. In other words, I didn't really want to get you something, but I felt obligated, so I got you this gift. And the other person will say, you know, that's kind of a waste. It's a waste of your time, energy, and your money. At level 2B, the rhetoric, I'm so happy that I was able to read this with you. I mean, isn't this genius rhetoric? I mean, you cannot help but be challenged by the way in which Whitman can spin a line for you that really makes you think. The power of the word pictures. What was your favorite word picture out of all of these? Note how Emerson can construct his argument so that he kind of leads you to a point where he can then challenge you a little bit, and then he kind of concedes a point and kind of backs away, and he says, well, you know, if love is in the mix, then I'm not going to mess with that one, right? Of course, the use of, as we said, conceding the points and saying something that is going to the acrimonious audience, or the audience with whom he might not always be in connection, is going to at least agree with one or two things that he has to say. There are people, readers of this, maybe you're one of them, who's kind of insulted by this. I like to receive gifts, and if somebody doesn't give me a gift, then I feel offended. And you read this essay and you kind of go, whoa, I guess I really haven't thought about it from that perspective. Maybe there's some immaturity on my part that's always looking for a gift, right? At level 3A, how do we relate this to other texts and to the world? Well, we've already mentioned, of course, the Troy tale and the great line from Aeneid 2, right? Beware, Greeks bearing gifts. In other words, you've got to be careful sometimes when people give you gifts as if somehow, they're doing this out of love, and maybe they have an ulterior motive, right? What's your favorite movie about gift giving? It's an interesting question. In all the films, what's your favorite movie about gift giving and about the giving? Of course, we think about that novel, The Giver, don't we? And we think about the idea of what it is that we give and what it is that we receive in great storytelling and the notion of the history of the past. What's your favorite song about a gift, right? There's maybe on your playlist a song that comes to mind, okay? Of course, some of you will say, as we're already moving towards 3B, that one of the coolest things another person can give to me is a song. I got this song. It might not be one that I wrote, but it is one that I can share, right? And this is often a great gift. At 3B, the way we relate this to ourselves? Well, it's time to ask the question. I mean, do you agree with Emerson? Do you disagree with Emerson, and where, in regards to his ideas about gift giving? Sometimes students will say, this essay, little 6-paragraph essay, has opened up for me a whole new way of thinking about gift giving. And the ways in which I often maybe am more a person who likes to receive gifts than to give gifts. Of course, we could ask this question at 3B. What is your favorite gift story? I shared mine with you. It's one of my favorite stories from my own biography about receiving a gift. My daughter would say many years later, as we were talking and reminiscing about this gift, that she said, well, the first gift was when you gave me Whitman and the great lines from Leaves of Grass. My gift to you was to show you my appreciation. That is what Emerson would say is true gift giving of the penultimate kind. Of course, we could often say that, you know, your favorite gift story from your youth, both in terms of what you gave and what you received. We should also point out that, of course, people give of themselves in love. We've said this in our comments on Tintern Abbey, little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. Before you leave home, it makes sense to look those people in the eye and say, hey, Ma, just hear me out for a second. About all of the stuff you've done for me, thank you. I mean, really, thank you. What a compelling gift to give to another person, to say thank you. To show gratitude is one of the highest gifts, right? Of course, this is an interesting idea. The Acts 20:35 passage comes to mind. It's more blessed. You're more happy to give than to receive. What would Emerson say about that, and what do you think about that? This ability to give is a sign of maturity, the joy of giving, and not just giving, but giving without any expectation of gratitude, or you better say thank you if I'm giving, or now it's, you know, I gave them gifts every year and they never get. Emerson will say, the gift is tainted if you live with that kind of an understanding. Well, there you go. I hope that you've enjoyed this study. We now next turn in our next essay in the Harvard Classics Volume 5 to Emerson's essay, Nature. Now, this is the 1844 essay called Nature, not the 1836 book-length essay called Nature. That one doesn't end up in the Harvard Classics. I'm going to go ahead and give a lecture later on that one. But now I'll be talking here next about this classic essay, Nature, and we'll go back to Emerson as great philosopher and idealist, transcendentalist. Thank you for hanging with me for this. Hey, it was my gift to you and your gift to me to listen. Thank you.